Major funding for Marcia Adams' Heartland Cooking is provided by Chowder Woodworking, America's furniture craftsman. With more than 50 years' experience, Chowder provides ready-to-assemble furniture for today's home and office. By Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality in a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles. By Maple Leaf Farms, a symbol for ducklings and frozen entrees, chef quality you can count on.
Hello and welcome to Heartland Cooking. Today we're doing fish recipes. It's certainly a favorite food, and the sport of fishing is an honored pastime and recreation in the Midwest. You know, our country has been blessed with hundreds of thousands of natural lakes, and in the Midwestern lakes swim bluegills and bass of many varieties, plus pike and perch, catfish and trout. We're going to cook an assortment of fish today, and the first one is perch. And this particular fish can be caught right off the end of the boat dock or from a boat. The recipe comes from the Oyster Bar restaurant in Fort Wayne, Indiana. These perch can be either sautéed in olive oil or deep fried in peanut oil, and we're going to deep fry them today. One of the most important things about deep frying is to give the deep fryer and the oil that's used enough time to heat. In this case, that's 350 degrees. So turn it on and let it heat before you begin the preparations. Now, in a bowl, let's prepare the batter. You want to combine 2 cups of all-purpose flour and 2 cups of very fine breadcrumbs that have been done in a food processor. And then we're going to add some very nice spices and herbs. 2 tablespoons of minced fresh dill, and 1 tablespoon of minced fresh thyme, and 1 teaspoon of white pepper. This is kind of a sassy combination. And then 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. Doesn't this sound really delicious and good? I know you're going to like it. Now stir this together. And I'm going to use my hands, as usual, to speed things up. And hands are so efficient. And then we're going to make the what is called an egg wash for this particular recipe. And to 2 beaten eggs, we add 2 cups of milk. Now, I don't have any idea why this is called an egg wash, because certainly this fish isn't dirty that we're going to put in here. But nonetheless, that's what this is called. And combine that. And then we're going to take our very nice yellow perch. This is considered a very good perch, incidentally, one of the better ones. And if you buy yellow perch, they'll be a little more expensive. That is, if you haven't caught it off the end of your pier, or your dock, as we say in the Midwest. Now, you want to do this in batches. 4 is about right. You dip the perch fillets first in the egg wash, and then you dip them in this flour crumb mixture that's been seasoned with dill. And set that aside, because you're going to do what I call double dip. Dip it again. We're going to do 2 here, I think. And once again into these savory crumbs. And then do it another time. This is not really a heavy batter. That may surprise you, but it isn't. It's just going to coat it very nicely. Now, drop the fillets into the hot oil and deep fry until golden brown. And for my fryer, that's about 3 to 5 minutes. Now, while those are cooking, I'm going to show you how to make a lovely cucumber relish that's served with them at the Oyster Bar. It's made of cucumbers and other colorful vegetables, so it's really pretty. And you begin with 1 chopped cucumber and 1 red bell pepper and 1 small red onion and 3 celery stalks. And cut these up by hand. Don't do this in a food processor because the texture won't be right. And the dressing is really simple. You whisk together an egg, and then to this add the juice of 1 lemon. Whisk that in, and 1/4 cup of rice wine vinegar, and 1 cup of olive oil. And add this gradually. You're going to make an emulsion. You know, when the Pilgrims arrived, they were, I should say, indifferent fishermen. In England, they had been merchants and industrialists, and they were very ill-prepared for what they found when they got here. They didn't know anything about hunting or fishing, and they nearly starved. And it was a friendly Indian named Squanto who taught them how to first, how to first scoop eels out of the streams with their hands. The Pilgrims had brought no fishing nets with them, and their fishing tackle they brought along was incorrect. for the kind of fish that they found here. It's a miracle they didn't starve, as I mentioned. Now we're going to pour this dressing over the diced vegetables and mix that together. Switch to a spoon. Now this should be marinated, or it should be allowed to macerate, I think would be the proper word, for at least 2 hours at room temperature, and then put it in the refrigerator until it's ready to be served. I want to check this fish. Ooh, it's perfectly done, perfectly done. Let me get it out here so I can see what it looks like. Isn't that great? And there we have it. That was not 3 to 5 minutes. Really, your temperature varies so much from manufacturer to manufacturer of French fryers. You just have to sort of use your own judgment. That went very fast today. Didn't do it that way yesterday. Now, after the fish are done, put them on a warm platter and serve them with the relish either on the side or spoon it over the top of the fillets themselves. These fish are really very light and crisp and greaseless, as you can tell. And the cucumber relish is a lovely potpourri of textures and flavors, and it's really a wonderful, wonderful dish. Don't forget this recipe. Our next recipe is a fish chowder with cream and potatoes, and it's similar to a Finnish chowder, F-I-N-N-I-S-H, like you'd find up in Minnesota, but we're dressing it up with a bit of white wine and spices. This soup couldn't be simpler, and you begin by placing in a heavy Dutch oven or a soup kettle like this all the ingredients except the cream, and you bake it for an hour. But here's what we put in it. 2 pounds of very firm textured, non-oily fish, such as walleye or whitefish. And you want it cut in rather large chunks like this because it will break up during baking. Now, if you can't find walleye in your part of the country or whitefish, you could substitute halibut or haddock or cod. It's just lovely in this soup anyway. And then we're going to add all the rest of the ingredients, just like I told you. And those are 2 cans, and those are 6.5-ounce cans of minced or whole clams with the juice. That juice is going to add a lot of flavor to that stock. And then 4 medium onions, and these can be cut in the food processor so they're quite fine. And 4 baking potatoes, and those too have been done in the food processor. And then 1/2 cup of margarine or butter. It's looking up, isn't it, as far as flavor goes? Get every bit off of there I can. And the spices are simply lovely. We have 1 bay leaf, 4 whole cloves, a tablespoon of minced dill, and a teaspoon of minced fresh garlic. And then add 1/2 cup of white wine. See, I told you this was all fixed up in a fancy way for chowder. And 2 cups of hot water. And I think we need a speck of salt and pepper here as well to make this come together nicely. Now, very gently mix this together because you want the fish to remain in big pieces because, as I mentioned, it's going to bake up into smaller pieces as it cooks. I'd say that was about enough stirring. Better to understir than overstir. Get all the butter in there. Now cover this tightly and bake this at 1 hour at 375 degrees. And don't stir during the baking. And after it has baked for 1 hour, bring it out of the oven and turn the oven off. And you're going to see why, or I'm going to tell you why. Because you're no longer going to continue cooking this, even though it does have about 10 more minutes in its cooking time. And bring this over here and add to this 2 cups of half and half and stir it in. Again, gently. Now what you want to do next is to return this to the oven that you've turned off with the lid on and let it just stand there for 5 to 10 minutes more. That's just to heat the cream. You mustn't let this boil or it will curdle. That's why we turned off the oven. This is a lovely, lovely soup, and I always find it served with either salt pork or bacon that's been cooked on the top. And here we have salt pork and bacon that's been rendered out. And this is what salt pork looks like before it's been cooked. And salt pork is just what its name implies, it's cut from the belly of the pig, and you should always look for a piece that has the most lean in it. This is salted. It is not smoked like bacon. Now, if it's too salty for you, you might want to blanch it by dropping it in some hot water and simmering it for a few minutes. I don't ever do that, but I don't mind salty things. Now, to do the garnish, as we have done for this soup, this has been cut in small pieces and rendered, the fat has been rendered out of it, and it leaves you with these little pieces of salt pork. It's quite delicious. And then we're going to sprinkle a few of those on top of this lovely chowder. Isn't this pretty? We're going to use bacon today. If we were in New England, we would probably use the salt pork. And in New England, they call this part of the recipe the gritties, G-R-I-T-T-I-E-S. Isn't that funny? The salt pork is an important ingredient in a lot of New England and Southern cookery. It's a very important ingredient, incidentally, in cassoulet and Boston baked beans. You know, I'm very fortunate to live on one of those smaller lakes in Indiana, and most mornings I see many fishermen in front of our house. It's a great place to fish because we have large Wisconsin willow trees bending out over the water, and that provides a cool place for the fish and the fishermen to congregate. Because I don't fish very often, it was a real treat to go fishing with Dr. John Davis, expert fisherman, naturalist, and sports writer. And besides all of that, he's president of Grace College in central Indiana. Our Midwest is blessed with thousands of freshwater lakes, and fishing is certainly a pleasant pastime, as I discovered on an early April afternoon. Chapman Lake was teeming not only with fish, but waterfowl as well. The wild geese and ducks were nesting, and there was certainly a lot of activity on the water. Isn't this beautiful? And in the cattails, red-winged blackbirds whistled as Dr. Davis and I boated by. The birds were as intoxicated by the spring as I was. Indiana, as well as other Midwestern states, has become militant about preserving their wetlands, and well, they should. This seemed like a very good place to drop a line.
Marcia, what we're going to be doing today is to fish Chapman Lake, which is a very clear water lake, fed by springs, and we're going to be fishing for America's favorite panfish, the bluegill.
Very good.
A lot of fun to catch and great eating. Because it's a clear lake, we're going to be using very thin line, and we'll be fishing with live bait and night crawler. And the rig that we'll be using is a slip bobber that slides up and down the line, and we'll set it there for the right depth that we want. We have split shot weights to keep it down, and then we're going to use the ever popular live bait, the night crawler. And we'll probably be fishing over a weed bed about 10 or 12 feet down because we have a cold front that has just come through, and the bluegills are probably going to be pretty deep.
Now, you mentioned 105 lakes in the region. Now we're speaking of northern Indiana.
This will be Kosciuszko County alone. There are actually more than 400 lakes in northern Indiana, and these are all natural lakes. They're not reservoirs. And that's why the fishing is so very good, because there's good natural reproduction among the fish, and the waters are generally very clean and therefore produce very good tasting fish. Marcia, I think you've got a bite. Good. I think you've set the hook, you've got them.
Now, you said that you used a very transparent line here because it wouldn't show in this clear water.
Right, it's just 4-pound tests, and that's good. Just bring them up slowly in the side, and
here he comes. Oh, this is exciting.
very nice bluegill.
Very
Just bring it right over here so we can get them in. And
Okay, great.
excellent.
How long is he?
Well, it's probably going to be 6 inches or 7 inches or so.
Or 8 or
And
9.
well, it'll grow with time, and we'll be able to fillet that fish out, and it's going to be, boy, you really got them hooked when you do it. You do it right.
Oh, good, good.
That's excellent. Well, that comes out nicely, and there's a beautiful northern Indiana bluegill, and there's the little gill that we look for to identify them, and this will make a beautiful dinner for somebody. At least it's a good start at any rate. Let's put it in a live well and keep it nice and fresh.
John, I have a question. It's not totally related to fishing, but if you're a fisherman, what does that make me? Am I a fisher person or a fisherwoman or what?
An anglerette. In my column, I frequently refer to them as fisher persons now, or anglerettes, or anglers generally. Anglers is a good term.
Very
and
good.
that covers it all.
Well, I do want to be proper about this.
Right.
After spending an afternoon on one of these lakes, you can see why we should guard our wetlands and natural waters. Wetlands, identified by certain vegetation, such as cattails, absorb the flooding, and they also act as chemical sponges. They absorb the toxins and impurities, and most importantly, provide natural habitats for fish and wildlife and waterfowl. Wetlands keep lakes clear and blue and pure, and they provide years of pleasure to fishermen and gourmets alike as they nourish sunfish and bluegills and crappies and pike for the skillet and the grill, as well as peaceful places of repose that are rapidly disappearing in our society. That day was very special because the weather was so beautiful and the world seemed very tranquil, at least for a little while. I really understand why people love the sport of fishing. Something else that Dr. Davis told me, which I thought was interesting, that I want to pass on to you. If you do a lot of fishing, or if you are given a lot of fish that are filleted and you have enough to freeze, he suggests packing them in half-gallon milk containers. Just stack them in the plastic containers or the waxed containers, and then fill it up with water and freeze them. Now, if you're given smaller amounts of fish, he vacuum packs those in plastic sacks and then redoes it. So in other words, the bags, the fish are double bagged. I thought those were very good hints because really fish are very, very sensitive to freezer burn. Well, I want to get into this recipe because it's kind of interesting. It's one of those Midwestern specialties because all over the Midwest on Friday night is fish fry night. We all know that out here. It's one of those all-you-can-eat events, and they're held in church basements or American Legion halls, high school auditoriums, and country taverns. The fish variety may be anything from smelt in the spring, because that's when they run. I don't know why they say that, when they run, because actually they're swimming, from bass from Lake Erie, and that's what we're using today. If you go to a tavern or American Legion where these fish suppers are being held, the platters of fish at these fish fries are kept full of crispy, golden brown, deep fried fish. And the traditional accompaniment to this is a creamy, sweet tartar sauce. Midwesterners seem to like sweet tartar sauce. I do myself. Now, we're going to get started on the recipe so I can show you how it's done. In a bowl, we're going to combine 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour and 1/4 cup of cornstarch. So you know right away with that cornstarch, it's going to be a very nice, light, puffy batter. And to that then, add 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper and 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. It was interesting to me to note that as I traveled around sampling all these fish fries, that nutmeg was a very common thing to add to the batter, and you can hardly taste it, but it adds a nice touch. And in some communities, they even add a bit of mace. Now, in a bowl, beat 2 egg yolks, and to that, add 1/2 cup of beer, probably Milwaukee beer, and 1 minced garlic clove, and then a dash of red pepper sauce. That was liberal. Now we're going to combine the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients. And that's going to make a very nice batter. Don't you love this bowl? This was my mother's, and she always used it for baking bread. Now I'm going to review for you what we have put in the batter. 3/4 cup of flour, 1/4 cup of cornstarch, 1/2 teaspoon of salt and pepper, and 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. And then we beat 2 egg yolks and added 1/2 cup of beer, a teaspoon of minced fresh garlic, and a dash of red pepper sauce. Now this batter should set for at least 2 hours or even overnight in the refrigerator. And there's one way to tell if the batter is the right consistency. It shouldn't ribbon. What ought to happen is just what's happening here. See, that's coming off in like little triangles and going splat into the batter, and that means it's done. Now, this might thicken up on you, and if it does, just add a little bit more beer. This is a very casual sort of recipe. You don't have to be too fancy about it. Now, the oil in the deep fryer should be at 375 degrees. Incidentally, if you don't have a deep fryer, any deep kettle or saucepan, preferably a heavy one, will do. And you can even use your electric fry pan if it's deep enough. I happen to like these because they have the thermostats on. It really does help control the temperature. Now we're going to dip the fish, and these are the Lake Erie bass. Now, make sure that you have this fish thoroughly covered with the batter because it will show up in the finished product if you don't. And then drop it into the hot fat and cook this until it's golden brown. And that's going to be maybe 8 to 9 minutes. The fish comes to the top when it's cooked, but you do want it golden brown so it's appetizing looking. Now we're going to make this very nice tartar sauce. And as I had mentioned to you earlier, out here in the Midwest we like a sweeter tartar sauce than maybe you're accustomed to. And we begin with 1 cup of commercial mayonnaise. And to this we're going to add all sorts of good things. We'll start with 2 tablespoons of minced chopped sweet pickle, not sweet pickle relish, mind you, and a tablespoon of finely minced onion, a tablespoon of finely minced parsley, and 2 tablespoons of finely minced dill. And combine those, and then add to this 2 teaspoons of cider vinegar, and a teaspoon of sugar, and a ½ teaspoon of hot red pepper sauce. This has quite a bit of snap to it. Now, ordinarily, I make a double recipe of this because we have fish frequently at our house. And then just refrigerate this until you're ready to serve it. Now, I'm going to give you some more French frying tips. Don't skimp on the amount of oil that you put in your kettle. You need enough oil that it completely covers the food and permits the food to move freely in the kettle. Also, foods that are at room temperature fry quicker, absorbing less fat than cold foods. You should bring the cold food to room temperature. Also, the temperature of the oil automatically drops when you add food to it. Due to time limitations today, we can't see how that fish looks when it comes out of the pot, but I do have some over here for you. If you can't get to your own country tavern or an American Legion down the street, I do know now that you'll be able to do your own fish fry at home. Today, we really had a pretty fishy show, but nonetheless, these are sincerely very good recipes. We started with perch, and it's accompanied by a sprightly and stylish cucumber relish. Creamy finished chowder, all gussied up with a touch of white wine and a few spices. And this delicious fried fish, like you'll find at the country taverns across the Midwest, white bass with a sweet and tangy tartar sauce. You know, you might not think of the fish as being a decorative motif, but actually artists have been using it since biblical times. Fish also appear in Picasso's and Escher's work. Today we have examples of how potters use the image of the fish. Majolica is a tin enameled glazed pottery and has been produced by many countries for centuries. It originally took its name from the island of Majorca. In 1880, this ware was given away as a premium by a large tea company. Most Majolica we find today is from the 19th or 20th century. This teapot, sugar, and creamer are decorated with fish, and even on the finials you'll find the image repeated, and inside it's tinted pink. Seldom do you find a complete set like this intact. And this Majolica picture is simply stunning. The fish goes one way on this side, another way on this side, and even the handle is a fish. Now look at these unusual items. These are fish decoys, weighted lures without hooks. They're dropped into the water to attract fish and are frequently used by ice fishermen who will then use a spear to catch the fish after it has been lured into range. Most fish lures are indeed shaped like fish, but not always. This collector, Judy Hughes, also has frogs and turtles. The art world was startled a few years ago when a 19th century minnow lure sold for more than $20,000. The value of a lure depends on scarcity, age, condition, and most of all, the reputation of the carver. It's still possible to find fish decoys for less than $100. They do make delightful decorating accessories. So until next time, esse gut, eat good.
Major funding for Marcia Adams Heartland Cooking is provided by Chowder Woodworking, producers of ready-to-assemble furniture for the home and office, America's furniture craftsmen with more than a half-century of experience. By Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality in a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles. By Maple Leaf Farms, a symbol for ducklings and frozen entrees, chef quality you can count on.